It started with blueprints and a vision. After years of saving, planning, and cutting corners just to make things work, I finally broke ground on my dream home. Nestled in a quiet suburban community surrounded by tall pines and rolling sidewalks, the lot I bought was perfect. I'd found a modern design I loved, a mix of glass, stone, and wood, with clean lines and open space. It wasn't extravagant, just me. The neighborhood was controlled by a homeowners association. Sure, but I'd done everything by the book: permits, designs, and zoning approvals. I wasn't some wild card builder. I was a guy trying to make something permanent in a world that often felt temporary. And for the first 2 weeks, it was going great. The foundation had been poured and framing was about to begin. I'd stop by after work and watch as my dream slowly took shape, smiling as the golden hour sunlight danced on the rebar and fresh concrete. Then one morning, everything changed. When I pulled up to the site, a bold red stop work order was stapled to the temporary fencing. Next to it, in thick Sharpie, were the words, "Zoning violation, Section 14.3, non-conforming design elements." I froze. "No way," I muttered, tearing the paper off. Within minutes, my contractor arrived, equally confused. "This doesn't make sense," he said. "You had full approval. This came from the HOA? Turns out it did." Indirectly. The HOA had filed a formal complaint with the zoning office, claiming my home design didn't align with community aesthetics. They referenced obscure bylaws and even cited a clause about roof slope uniformity. I was stunned. So I went straight to the HOA office. Inside, I found him. Charles Dempsey, the HOA president. 60-something, stiff posture, blazer in the middle of summer. He had a perpetual sneer on his face like he smelled something bad. And he looked delighted to see me storm in. "Mr. Porter," he said, not even standing, "if you're here about the stop work order, you'll need to direct your questions to the zoning board." "You filed the complaint," he shrugged, "as is my duty. Your design violates several community standards. If we let everyone build modernist monstrosities, what would happen to property values?" "Property values?" I said. "You think a modern home will destroy the neighborhood?" "Not the neighborhood," he replied, "just the harmony." The word harmony had never sounded so smug. I left fuming. I tried to reason with the zoning office, but suddenly they were reviewing the situation. Construction halted. My contractor had to pull his team. The foundation sat there like a dead dream. I was bleeding money every day. For a while, I thought maybe this was just bureaucracy. Maybe the HOA was being overly strict and things would blow over. But then I started hearing stories from neighbors, from local builders, from city records. Turns out, Charles Dempsey had a personal vendetta against non-traditional builds. 3 years ago, he'd blocked another couple's A-frame house. A year before that, he filed a complaint about someone using too much black trim. He wasn't protecting the neighborhood, he was controlling it. Worse yet, the head zoning officer, a guy named Blake Hammond, was his golf buddy. That's when the anger gave way to something sharper, clarity. I wasn't just building a home. I was fighting a system that was rigged from the inside. Every emotion hit me at once: frustration, helplessness, rage, and underneath it all, disbelief that this could happen so easily with a single signature. I sat on the tailgate of my truck that night, staring at the half-built foundation. My dream home was becoming a battleground, and if I wanted it back, I'd have to fight fire with fire. "You sure you want to do this?" My friend Marcus asked a few days later as we walked out of a county records office. "I've never been more sure of anything," I said. He looked at the paperwork in my hand. "Then let's shake the tree." Because what Charles didn't know, what most people didn't know, was that the zoning office was privatized. It had been outsourced to a third-party management firm years ago to streamline operations. That firm? It was now up for acquisition due to a quiet buyout. And guess who had just found an investor group with an axe to grind? I wasn't ready to make my move just yet, but something inside me had shifted. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about proving something. I wasn't some outsider who didn't fit in. I was a part of this neighborhood just like anyone else. And no, HOA president hiding behind bylaws and personal bias was going to take that from me, not without a fight. The first shot was fired when I met with the acquisition attorney, the company that handled zoning enforcement in our district. Metroland Planning Group had been quietly looking for a buyout. They were small, with barely any public profile, and operated under a long-term city contract to handle overflow permit processing, compliance checks, and yes, complaint responses. It was all legal, all above board. And more importantly, it was for sale. Can you get it done? I asked. Marcus, who knew the ropes of acquisitions, he gave me a nod. We form a holding company, make an offer under market with a 60-day close, and slip in a clause about operational authority. By the time they notice, we'll own the keys to the machine. I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, Hope, but Charles Dempsey must have sensed something shifting. Because just a week after we began paperwork, the HOA stepped up their game. It started with anonymous complaints that my construction site had excessive noise, even though no work was happening. Then came claims of exposed materials attracting rodents, followed by a full-on sanitation inspection. One morning, I showed up to see a city health inspector walking the property like it was a crime scene. "You've got to be kidding me," I said. He shrugged. "We got a report. We have to check it out." My blood boiled. Let me guess, anonymous? Yeah, but it came with photographs. Photos. From inside the fence. Someone was trespassing. I went to the HOA office, slamming down the latest cease and desist letter like a legal grenade. "You crossed a line," I told Charles. He didn't even flinch. "You've been given multiple chances to conform," he said calmly, sipping a mug of herbal tea. "But if you think harassing our board will help you, I assure you it won't. I'm not harassing anyone. I'm fighting back." "You're losing," he replied. "Your site is empty. Your permits are frozen. And your design has no place in this neighborhood." Then came the real kicker. He leaned forward and whispered, "You should just sell the lot and leave. Some places just aren't meant for everyone." I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. That wasn't about my house anymore. That was about me. That night I sat in silence, staring at the plans pinned to my wall, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the green roof, the split-level kitchen. Was it really worth this war? But then I remembered my dad's words. "Don't let the gatekeepers tell you where you belong." I couldn't stop. 2 weeks later, the paperwork finalized. Through a show-holding company, I now own Metroland Planning Group. We moved fast. Quietly replaced key staff. Reviewed all current files and complaints. I didn't even need to interfere. The corruption revealed itself. Dozens of cases had been manipulated at the zoning level, all funneled through the same two names, Blake Hammond, the zoning head, and Charles Dempsey, who used citizen complaints as weapons. I had the receipts, emails, calls, even documentation where Blake personally flagged my case as urgent before the HOA had filed a complaint. That was the plot twist. Charles hadn't just complained, he'd planned it. But here's the thing, I didn't fire anyone. Not yet. Because if I was going to win, I needed more than revenge. I needed a reversal. So I requested a formal zoning review of all recent construction halts in the district, including mine. And as the owner of the zoning firm, I had full authority to reassign staff. Blake? I sent him on indefinite leave for conflict of interest. My case? Handed to a third-party reviewer. And the result? Design conforms to all municipal zoning and residential compliance requirements. Work stoppage lifted effective immediately. The next morning, I returned to my site with a full crew, trucks, materials, and a smile. Construction resumed like nothing had ever happened, but I didn't announce what I'd done. I didn't flaunt ownership. I wanted Charles to wonder, to seethe, and he did that. By week 2. He'd filed 4 more complaints, ranging from dust pollution to excessive visual disruption. All of them dismissed within 24 hours. Then came the big move. Charles organized a community emergency meeting, calling it the Crisis of Neighborhood Identity. Flyers went up with a grainy picture of my home's frame, captioned, "Is this what we want our community to become?" I went. The meeting hall was packed. Older residents, some younger couples. Even a few local contractors. Charles took the podium, voice full of panic and pride. "This isn't just about one home," he said. "It's about preserving the legacy of this neighborhood. We must protect ourselves from design chaos, from visual clutter, from Hoffather, from anything you don't personally like." I said loudly, stepping forward. All eyes turned. Charles tried to recover. "You're welcome to share your perspective, Mr. Porter." "Thank you. I will." I walked to the front and held up a printed copy of the zoning review. "This is the official ruling from the Independent Review Board, not some biased complaint form. My design is legal, compliant, and approved." Murmurs spread. "And while we're at it," I added, pulling out a second document, "maybe the board would like to explain why their president was in private correspondence with the zoning director 2 weeks before any complaints were filed." Gasps. One woman whispered, "He did what?" Charles turned pale. "This isn't about protecting a neighborhood," I said, staring him down. "This is about control." He stormed out. The crowd was left buzzing. Some were furious, others quietly grateful. The HOA board didn't dissolve, but Charles stepped down the following week, citing health reasons. The rest of the board went quiet. Complaints dried up, but I wasn't gloating. I felt relieved, not because I won, but because I proved something to myself. You don't have to fight dirty to win. You just have to be smarter, calmer, and more relentless than the people who think they own the rules. The morning Charles stepped down as HOA president, the neighborhood shifted. You could feel it in the air. Less tension, more conversation. People who never looked up from their lawns now waved when I passed. A few even apologized quietly at the grocery store, saying they didn't know the full story. But I wasn't interested in making enemies of the neighbors. I never was. This was never about some petty war over rooflines and siding. It was about principle, about fighting back against a system where one man with a title could crush your life plans with a signature and a sneer. The dream house was back on track. Framing, roofing, windows, all moving fast now that the roadblocks were gone. I even started landscaping early, just to reclaim the image I'd been carrying in my head for so long. Every nail felt like a win. Every wall was a push against the people who said I didn't belong. But just as the dust began to settle, something happened I didn't expect. I started to feel sorry for Charles. He hadn't left the neighborhood. His house, tucked 3 blocks away, was now just another quiet spot on the map. I saw him once watering his lawn in a polo shirt, glancing around as if the whole street might pounce on him. There was no HOA coup, no public disgrace, just silence. And that might have been worse for him than losing a fight. I learned later from a former board member that Charles didn't start corrupt. He got power hungry. Somewhere along the way, he started seeing the neighborhood as his brand, and anything that didn't match became a threat. Was it sad? A little. Did I regret taking him down? Not at all, because here's the thing. There are too many people who suffer quietly because they think they're alone, because they think the rules are written in stone. I wanted to change that, not just for me, but for everyone else coming after so I went a step further. Owning Metroland Planning Group gave me power. But power means nothing unless you use it for something bigger than yourself. I formed a community oversight panel, a team of local residents, architects, and even one retired zoning officer who hated HOA politics. They'd review residential zoning disputes across the district, ensuring no one ever had to go through what I did alone. And then I sent a letter to every HOA board in the region. This office will no longer accept complaints rooted in personal taste, subjective visual standards, or non-legally binding neighborhood aesthetic policies unless they are supported by municipal code. Abuse of the complaint system will result in revocation of filing privileges. Translation? No more weaponizing zoning. Meanwhile, my house was almost done. And not just the structure, but the story. It stood tall, modern, and unapologetically different from everything around it. But it fit somehow. Maybe not in color or shape, but in spirit, because it represented something the neighborhood had forgotten. People make communities, not conformity. The day the last window was installed, my contractor clapped me on the shoulder and said, "You know, man, you made more than a house here. You made a point." And that hit me hard. A week after moving in, I held a small gathering. Nothing fancy, just some local friends, curious neighbors, and the oversight panel. There were kids running through the halls, snacks laid out on granite counters, music humming through hidden speakers. And as the sun set, the glass walls caught, the light just right, glowing gold like a fire inside. One of the older residents, Mrs. Langley, who'd lived in the neighborhood for 30 years, leaned in and said, "This place, it's different. But it's beautiful." I smiled. That's kind of the point. Then came the unexpected. At the very end of the evening, as guests trickled out and laughter faded into the night, a knock echoed at my door. I opened it, and there he was. Charles Dempsey. He looked tired, not defeated, just older. Like the war had finally bled out of him. "I wasn't expecting you," I said calmly. "I almost didn't come," he replied. "I just wanted to see it. The house." I stepped aside. He walked in slowly like he was in a museum, ran his hand along the smooth wooden railing, looked out through the glass wall onto the soft glow of garden lights in the yard. "It's impressive," he admitted. "Thank you." He hesitated. I let my role become personal, and I lost sight of what I was supposed to be protecting. I didn't say anything. He didn't expect me to. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "I just wanted you to know I understand now." I nodded. And for the first time since the fight began, we stood in the same room, not as enemies, but as two people who just got too caught up in protecting different ideas of home. Before he left, Charles paused at the door. "You were right about one thing," he said. "People make communities, not the rules." The next day, I put the final touch on my property. A small plaque beside the front gate that read, "Built with resistance." Stands for resilience. It wasn't for the HOA. It wasn't for Charles. It was for everyone who walked by and wondered if they could ever build something that didn't look like everything else and still be accepted. Because the lesson I took from all of this, fitting in is easy. Standing out takes courage. And sometimes the only way to change the rules is to own the system that writes them.